You look at the calendar, at your age on paper, and it doesn't match the way your bones feel when you get out of bed. You're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, but inside, it feels like you've lived 8 or 9 lives already. You're tired in a way that sleep doesn't touch. You catch yourself saying, "I feel so old," but you don't mean wrinkles or birthdays. You mean a heaviness that sits in the chest, a kind of emotional arthritis in the soul. If that's you, I want you to hear this very clearly. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling this way. You are not secretly weak, lazy, or broken. You are emotionally aged, not because time passed, but because you were forced to live too much life too early in a narcissistic family system. I'm going to walk you through why you feel older than your years, why your body and mind are carrying decades of weight that don't actually belong to you, and how you can begin to reclaim something you might not even recognize as yours anymore: your play, your joy, and your right to rest. Somewhere in your story, there was a moment when you stopped being a child and became a caretaker. Not metaphorically, literally. Maybe you remember it clearly. The night you stood in the kitchen making tea for a raging parent. The day you sat in the back seat comforting a younger sibling while the adults screamed in the front. Or maybe you don't remember a single moment. Maybe it felt like you were born already tired, already responsible, already on duty. In narcissistic families, children are rarely allowed to just be children. You were drafted into a role: the parentified child, the responsible one, the mediator, the therapist, the peacekeeper, the one who knew when dad was about to explode by the way his keys hit the table, the one who knew when mom was about to collapse by the way she sighed in the kitchen. Your nervous system became the family's early warning system, scanning for danger before anyone else even noticed something was wrong. While other kids were learning how to play, you were learning how to read micro-expressions, track moods, and preempt disasters. While other kids cried when they were overwhelmed, you swallowed your feelings because there was no space for them. Someone always had a bigger meltdown, a louder crisis, a more dramatic pain. Your job was to hold it all together. That is emotional aging. It's not just growing up fast. It's taking on an adult emotional workload before you have an adult brain, adult boundaries, or adult support. It's living in a state of constant tension, like a soldier who never gets to leave the battlefield. Your body remembers that. Your muscles remember that. Your voice remembers that. Think of your inner world as a house with many rooms. In one room, the frightened 7-year-old is still standing in the hallway, listening for raised voices. In another, the teenager is already working 2 jobs, worrying about money, making adult decisions with a child's nervous system. In yet another room, there's an ancient feeling version of you sitting in the dark, convinced it is already too late to start over. None of these parts are wrong. They each formed to survive a specific season of your life. But when you never had support to integrate them, they froze in place. Time moved on outside, birthdays came and went, but inside, those rooms stayed exactly the same. Emotional aging in narcissistic families is not just about feeling old. It is about being scattered across time. The work ahead is not to erase any of these inner ages, but to gently invite them into the same space so that the wise part of you can put an arm around the younger parts and say, "You don't have to keep watch anymore. I'm here now. We will walk forward together now." Think about it. How long have you been the reliable one? The strong one? The one who just handles things? How many times have you heard, "You're so mature for your age," or "You're like the parent in this family," said as if it were a compliment? Nobody mentioned the cost. Nobody asked what it does to a child's soul to hear that the only way they have value is by acting older, wiser, calmer than they actually feel. Inside you, there are different ages living at the same time. There is your chronological age, the number on your documents. There is your trauma age, the age you were when you first had to shut down your own needs to take care of someone else. And there is your emotional age today, which often feels decades older than your body. That mismatch is why you might feel like an 80-year-old in a 40-year-old body. Your nervous system has been on high alert for so long that normal for you is exhaustion. You've carried secrets, fears, and responsibilities that were never meant for a child to carry. You became the emotional parent to people who were supposed to parent you. That steals years of inner life. Jung spoke of the inner child and the inner elder the playful, curious part of us, and the wise, reflective part of us. In a healthy upbringing, those two get to develop side by side. You play, you rest, you explore, and slowly, genuine wisdom grows out of those experiences. But in narcissistic families, something different happens. The inner child is pushed underground, and the inner elder is forced to sit on a throne made of anxiety and hyper-responsibility. On the outside, you look like the wise one, the old soul, the one everyone comes to for advice. On the inside, there's a little kid who never got to climb, to make mistakes, to be silly without guilt. That child doesn't disappear. They become part of your shadow, the unlived, unexpressed life that quietly waits in the dark, knocking on the walls of your psyche with symptoms. Burnout, numbness, a sense that life is already over even though, rationally, you know it isn't. This is why you can feel both too old and strangely unfinished at the same time. Too tired to keep going, yet strangely like your real life hasn't even started. The part of you that feels ancient is the part that has been on duty for far too long. The part of you that feels like a stranger in your own life is the part that never got to come out. Let's make this even more concrete. Maybe you notice it in your body. Your shoulders creep up toward your ears by lunchtime. Your jaw is tight, your breath shallow. When someone texts you, your stomach drops, not because of what they said, but because any incoming contact might contain a demand, a crisis, or a guilt trip. Your body reacts as if a storm is always about to hit, even on quiet days. Maybe you notice it in your habits. You apologize for everything. You over-explain. You ask for almost nothing. You take on extra work at your job, emotional labor in your relationships, mental load in your family, because somewhere inside, you still believe that if you keep carrying it all, no one will explode. No one will leave. No one will fall apart. Maybe you notice it in your thoughts. You say things to yourself like, I should be stronger, I shouldn't be this tired, I don't have time to rest, other people have it worse. These are not random thoughts. They're the internalized voice of a system that trained you to believe your needs were an inconvenience. When a parent is narcissistic, aging and illness often become part of the script. They complain about how hard their life is. They lean on you emotionally. They talk about how tired they are, how no one helps them, how you're all they have. As a child or adult child, you inhale those messages. You take on their fatigue as your responsibility. You become old on their behalf. You might have become the listener for endless monologues about their pain. The one who got phone calls at midnight. The one who was told, if you don't do this, I don't know what I'll do, or after everything I've done for you. Each of those lines is a small theft of your youth. Each guilt hook adds another 10 invisible years to your emotional spine. So of course you feel old. Of course you feel like you've lived several lifetimes. You've been carrying multiple people's emotional ages on your back. But here is the quiet, radical truth. You are allowed to put some of that down. You are allowed to be closer to your real age, not the age your family assigned you. Reclaiming your emotional age isn't about suddenly acting like a teenager again. It's not about pretending you didn't go through what you went through. It's about letting your inner system redistribute the weight. It's about inviting the shadow child back into the light. For many adult children of narcissistic families, play, joy, and rest are not just unfamiliar. They feel dangerous. Rest feels like neglect. Play feels irresponsible. Joy feels selfish. That's because in your family, those things were often punished or shamed. Maybe when you relaxed, someone accused you of being lazy. Maybe when you laughed too loud, someone snapped, "Keep it down, you're embarrassing me." Maybe when you wanted something just for you, you were told, "Must be nice to think only about yourself." So your psyche hid those impulses away in the shadow to keep you safe. Jung taught that what we push into the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits. It distorts. It shows up in symptoms and dreams and sudden bursts of longing. When you feel an ache for a life you've never lived, that's your shadow calling. When you feel a random desire to paint, to dance, to lie in the sun and do nothing, and then immediately shut it down with guilt, that is your younger self trying to rise and your training pushing them back under. You might think, I don't even know how to play, or joy feels fake, or I don't remember ever truly resting. That's okay. You're not doing this wrong. You're just early in a process that should have started decades ago and is finally getting a chance now. So how do you begin to reclaim your voice, your energy, your true age? You start small. Tiny, almost invisible acts of rebellion against the idea that you exist only to carry other people's weight. Maybe you take 5 minutes a day where you're not productive, not useful, not fixing anything. You watch the light move across the wall. You listen to a song you loved when you were younger. You doodle nonsense in the margin of a notebook. Your mind will attack you at first. It will say, "This is stupid, you're wasting time, you should be doing something important." That's the old training talking. You don't have to argue with it. You just keep the pen moving. Maybe you experiment with one small no, not a dramatic confrontation. Just one tiny refusal in a place where you would normally say yes instantly. "I can't talk right now. I'm not available this weekend. I'll think about it." Notice what happens in your body when you say it. The rush of anxiety, the guilt, the voice that says you're a terrible child, friend, partner. Then notice something else. The world doesn't actually end. You're still here. That younger part of you just had a microdose of safety while not overgiving. That is emotional youth returning. Maybe you give your inner life a small piece of structure. 10 minutes before bed where you ask yourself, "How old do I feel right now?" And you answer honestly. Some nights you might feel 90. Some nights you might feel 8. Just naming it is powerful. You're starting to build a relationship with all the different ages inside you instead of forcing them into one exhausted mask. You might also need to grieve. This is the part most people try to skip. To reclaim your real age, you have to acknowledge the years you lost. The birthdays that were more about your parents' mood than your joy. The vacations you never took because someone was always in crisis. The version of you who could have been carefree at 16, 22, 30, but instead was budgeting money, calming drunks, raising siblings, absorbing chaos. Grief is not self-pity. It's honesty. It's saying to yourself, "What happened to me was not normal, and it makes sense that I am this tired." When you allow that truth, something softens. You stop berating yourself for being exhausted and start holding that exhaustion with compassion. Paradoxically, this is where some of the tiredness begins to lift. Because what keeps us trapped is not just what happened, but the way we keep telling ourselves we should be over it by now. You may find your body responding as you do this work. You might start sighing more, stretching more, feeling waves of fatigue you used to push away. This isn't regression. This is your system finally getting permission to stop bracing every second. Think of a soldier whose body only trembles once they're finally home. The shaking isn't weakness. It's release. Over time, as you listen to yourself, as you make small space for rest and play, your inner age begins to rebalance. You might notice a quiet shift. You still feel wise, but less like a burned-out prophet and more like someone who has earned their insight and also has permission to log off and go for a walk. You are allowed to have evenings where you do nothing. You are allowed to laugh at something silly without making it profound. You are allowed to choose relationships where you are not the therapist, the fixer, the emotional parent. In fact, your nervous system is starving for that. There will be people who don't like this shift, especially if they benefited from your emotional oldness. The parent who always came to you to complain may accuse you of being selfish when you gently redirect them to a professional or to their own peers. The sibling who always leaned on you might say you've changed. The friend who only called when they were in crisis might drift away when you stop being available 24/7. That hurts. It can feel like proof that you're doing something wrong. But often it's the opposite. It's proof that you're no longer willing to be the family's unpaid elder at the expense of your own life. You're not abandoning them. You're stepping out of a role you were never meant to fill in the first place. One day, if you keep walking this path, you may have a strange experience. You'll be sitting somewhere ordinary, drinking tea, driving, scrolling on your phone, and you'll suddenly realize, I don't feel as old as I used to. Not younger in the sense of pretending to be a teenager, but lighter, more aligned, like the inside of you and the outside of you are finally living in the same decade. That is not fantasy. That is the nervous system recalibrating once it no longer has to carry everyone else's storms. The final thing I want you to hear is this. Feeling older than your age was never proof that you were ruined. It was proof that you were loyal. Loyal to a family system that asked too much. Loyal to parents who were trapped in their own wounds. Loyal to a role that cost you far more than anyone saw. You can honor that loyalty and still choose something different now. You do not have to spend the rest of your life as the tired elder who never got to be young. There is a version of you who knows how to rest without apologizing, how to play without justification, how to say no without writing an essay. That version is not a fantasy. It is the part of you that never got to grow the first time. It is waiting right now beneath the weight that never belonged to you. You have carried everyone else's years long enough. This chapter of emotional aging does not have to be the final story. You are allowed to set down what is not yours, to reclaim the time that remains, and to step into a life where your body, your heart, and your age finally feel like they belong to the same person.